Shit. Okay. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Aryan and today I'll talk about the new COVID-19 vaccine, the Pfizer BionTech vaccine. After more than 68 million cases and 1.5 million deaths worldwide, finally the UK government has announced that they have approved of a vaccine and have even started vaccination. It was actually a 90-year-old lady who was the first receiver of the vaccine. The historic day was 10th of December 2020. Yes, finally something good comes out of 2020. Reports say that in this first batch of vaccination, around 800,000 people will be getting the vaccine, and they will mostly be targeting the more vulnerable group and the elderly. So let's take a dive into this new vaccine, okay? We'll see what are the pros and what are the cons of these vaccines. So, is this new vaccine the next step in fighting what has been the one of the worst pandemics, one of the deadliest pandemics this world has ever seen? Well, I hope so. So let's dive into some of the details of this US and German made vaccine. Pfizer is an American multinational pharmaceutical company, one of the world's biggest pharmaceutical company, and they are partnered with the German biotechnology company BioNTech. Pfizer and German partner BioNTech submitted data showing the two-dose regimen was 95% effective against COVID-19 and had no major safety issues. It has been approved for the use in UK and also in the US, which the officials have described as a historic moment in the fight against this pandemic. Next we'll see how this vaccine actually works. Okay? Before we really dive into how this vaccine works, let's see how a normal cell works and how this virus attacks a normal cell. Okay? In order for a cell to survive, it needs to reproduce. The constant multiplication of the cells is what keeps the organ intact and functional. The genetic material, the DNA of a cell, makes the necessary parts, which includes various proteins for its new offsprings. DNA of a normal cell forms RNA, which in turn can be converted into mRNA or the messenger RNA. This mRNA is responsible for synthesis of various important proteins that will eventually be parts of the new cells. This vaccine, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, it is based on the mRNA system. The spike proteins present in the coronavirus is an important protein for the virus to infect the human cell. Okay, the spiky pointed proteins, okay, that give the coronavirus its look like a crown, so the name corona. Okay, they are an important component in order for the virus to affect a human cell. When the virus enters the human body, it needs to get inside the cell in order to cause its damage. For this, the virus has something called a spike protein that will bind to the ACE2 receptor present on the surface of a cell. Just like a key binding to a lock and opening the lock, the virus will then enter the cell. After entering the cell, it will incorporate its genetic material with the genetic material of the cell and thus altering the genetic material of the cell. This will result in formation of a different mRNA and thus resulting in formation of altered proteins. These altered proteins are basically the body parts of the virus, including the spike protein. So the virus, it is incorporating itself to the human cell and forcing it to make new proteins that are actually the body parts for its own progeny or its own viral offsprings. Taking all this into account, now let's see what happens when we inject the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine into a human body. What Pfizer and BioNTech have done is that they have made a genetically engineered mRNA that, when injected, can incorporate itself into human cellular genetic material and thus make new proteins. These proteins are antibodies against the spike protein of the coronavirus. These antibodies basically cover the spike protein. When these spike proteins are covered with these antibodies, the virus can no longer enter a cell. Now, the lock cannot be opened by the same key. Now that we have discussed how this vaccine works, let's dive into the pros of these vaccines. So what might be the advantages or the good side of this vaccine? Okay. So the number one, highly effective. The early data shows that the Pfizer vaccine, if given in 2 doses, is around 95% effective in preventing confirmed cases of COVID-19. Now that 95, it is a huge number. Okay, that's why it is highly effective. But remember, it is only the early stages of this vaccination. We still need more data. Number two, fewer side effects. Pfizer has reported no serious side effects. Few of these recipients experienced flu-like symptoms like fever, tiredness, or muscle aches, especially after the second dose. It is likely to be a sign that the immune system is reviving up, able to recognize and fighting back the virus if the real virus comes along. Although encouraging, there is still insufficient data to conclude about the efficacy and side effects of this vaccine. Number three, a hope for humanity. After suffering physically, mentally, emotionally, economically, this new vaccine has given hope to the injured human race. Humanity now believes that this vaccine will play a significant role in ending the pandemic. So now let's look at the cons of this vaccine. Number one, how long will the vaccine's effect last? Just like influenza vaccine, it may require yearly shots or it may provide long immunity, which is unlikely since the vaccine does not contain the virus particle itself. If it had contained the virus particle, either dead or live attenuated, that is modified virus, this modified virus particle would have multiplied constantly in the human body, stimulating antibody production for a longer period of time, thus providing immunity for a longer duration. The second number con is safety. There is currently insufficient data to make conclusion regarding the safety of the vaccine in young population, pregnant women, and those who have compromised immune system. Third, number three seems to be the most challenging factor regarding this vaccine. Okay, it's storage. This vaccine, it needs to be stored at a very low temperature. At around minus 94 degree Fahrenheit, this vaccine, it will be effective for 6 months. But if you keep this vaccine at room temperature of 25 degree Fahrenheit, then it will only remain viable for 5 days. This is going to make transportation of vaccine from one country to another country very challenging and expensive. Number 4, cost effectiveness. Currently, one dose of this vaccine costs around $20 US. That means 2 doses will cost $40. So, vaccination in a country with around 10 million people will approximately cost a whopping $400 million for 2 doses. Okay, and this does not include the cost of vaccine transportation, which is a major economic concern. There are various reports suggesting that pharmaceutical companies will be working with government of different nations to reduce this cost. And I hope this is true. We still need more time, maybe a year, before we fully know how this vaccine is going to change the way we tackle COVID-19. But the news of this new vaccine has done one thing. It has raised the hope in human beings. I am hopeful.